Henry stumbled upon a bright orange paper stuck to his mailbox while fetching the morning paper. He blinked at it, the glare of the Florida sun catching the glossy surface of the notice. His fingers brushed the curled edge, still damp with dew, and he peeled it slowly from the metal box. Across the street, a woman in a pink tracksuit shuffled by with a miniature poodle tugging its leash. Henry glanced past her to the neat little bungalow with the hedge that used to stand proud, trimmed a bit too high last spring, and slapped with a similar orange tag. He remembered the commotion then. He'd brought Maureen Dalton's notice straight to Mel's porch and watched him spit into the grass and mutter, "They've got nothing better to do." Now it was Henry's turn. He stepped onto his porch, careful not to disturb the chipped edges of the top step. The porch creaked softly beneath his weight as he lowered himself into the rocking chair, next to a faded flag fluttering gently in the breeze. His wife's wind chime let out a soft jingle as if stirred by memory more than air. He unfolded the notice with deliberate fingers, his eyes adjusting to the black bold print. Notice of violation, non-compliant vehicle in driveway. Below, in smaller print, it referenced the Gulf Palms HOA guidelines about inoperable or unsightly vehicles left exposed. Henry didn't have to read further to know they were talking about the Chevy. His 1972 C10 pickup had been under its canvas cover for years, tucked beside the hibiscus hedge. He hadn't driven it since Maggie passed. The coffee pot inside beeped once, as if trying to offer comfort. Henry rose with a sigh, tucking the notice into his cardigan pocket. The breeze smelled of sea salt and grass clippings, and the sky had that soft amber glow that only October mornings knew how to wear. Inside, he stirred 2 spoonfuls of sugar into his mug before pouring in the cream. Always sugar first, Maggie's rule. As the radio crooned an old Patsy Cline tune, he leaned on the kitchen counter, the violation letter flat on the table beside a ceramic rooster napkin holder. "Let's see what the world's got to say today," he muttered, grabbing his keys. The Gulf Breeze Diner was only 6 blocks down Gulfstream Avenue, past palm trees and retirees walking laps. Henry pulled into the back lot, where the asphalt cracked like old leather. The bell above the door jingled as he entered, and the smell of bacon and pancakes hit like a wave of warmth. "Morning, Henry," Carol called from behind the counter. She was pouring coffee for a couple in matching golf shirts. "Table or booth?" He chose his usual stool at the counter, where the view included the kitchen window and the antique jukebox that hadn't worked in years. Carol refilled his mug without asking. "You look like a man with a story." Henry slid the notice across the counter. She read it with a scoff. "The HOA strikes again." He offered a slow shrug. "Guess they don't like antiques." "Well," she said, folding the notice back, "neither do they like wind chimes or garden gnomes or flamingo mailboxes. Makes you wonder if we live in a retirement town or a museum." "Could be both," Henry said, sipping quietly. A man down the counter complained about his knees. Another asked if the storm next week might cancel bingo night. Carol moved between refills and refried eggs with ease, and Henry simply listened, letting the familiarity of the place ease the tension in his chest. Back home, the porch felt lonelier than usual. Henry stepped around the pickup, lifting the edge of the canvas and letting it fall again with a sigh. It wasn't rusted out, just dusty, like everything that had mattered once. As twilight painted the street in soft lavender hues, Henry sat back in his rocker, the letter unfolded in his lap. The print glowed faintly under the porch light. "Failure to comply will result in vehicle removal by towing. Deadline, 5 days from receipt of notice." He ran a hand along his chin, feeling the day's stubble. The wind chime tinkled again, softer now. Inside, he placed the letter on the end table beside a dusty photo of Maggie in her garden hat, her smile still untouched by time. Henry folds the letter, sets it beside a dusty photo of his wife, and whispers, "Let them try." A metal clank echoed across Gulf Palms as Henry looked out the window. The sound wasn't sharp, but deep, final, like something important was being uprooted. Henry blinked away the remnants of a dream, glancing at the clock. 6:15 a.m. He'd meant to be up earlier. A small swear passed his lips as he pushed aside the curtain with a trembling hand. The mist still clung to the hedges outside. Palm fronds shimmered faintly under streetlights not yet shut off. There, right in front of his house, a tow truck idled, its hydraulic arm hoisting his old Chevy into the air like a forgotten relic. The canvas tarp sagged from one end, exposing a dusty license plate and the chrome bumper Maggie had polished every Sunday. Henry grabbed his robe, slid his feet into worn slippers, and shuffled outside. The air was thick and warm, the humidity already clinging to his skin despite the early hour. A mockingbird chirped somewhere in the distance. The tow driver spotted him and looked up with a wince. "Morning, sir." Henry stopped at the edge of the driveway, arms hanging at his sides. "That's my truck." "I know," the man said, offering a weak smile. "I'm just following orders from the HOA. Said the deadline was up." "It's been 5 days?" Henry asked, more to himself. The man nodded, stepping back as the truck settled into its rig. "Paperwork was filed yesterday afternoon. I got called this morning." Henry's eyes traced the slope of the driveway to where the rear tires of the pickup now floated above the pavement. The engine hadn't started in years. It wasn't much more than steel and memory, but it was his. Across the street, a silver SUV pulled to a slow stop. Behind the tinted windshield sat Maureen Dalton, sunglasses on despite the morning haze. She didn't wave. Didn't nod. Just sat there watching like someone surveying her prize. Then, slowly, the SUV crept forward and disappeared around the corner. Henry didn't call out. "Where you talking it?" he asked instead. "Storage yard out on Mill Creek Road. It's secure. You'll get a claim slip in the mail." Henry gave a slight nod, stepping back onto his lawn. The grass was damp. He didn't watch the truck leave. Just turned slowly and walked inside, as if something sacred had just been lifted out of his chest and carried away on a flatbed. He was still staring at his empty driveway when a car horn chirped behind him. A blue sedan rolled to a stop and the door flew open. "Dad?" Rebecca stood in pressed slacks and a pale green blouse, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked at the truck's absence, then at her father, then back again. I came early," she said, walking up. "Thought I'd surprise you." Henry rubbed his chin. "Sure picked a moment. What happened?" "They came for the truck." She looked down the road, eyes narrowed. "Without even talking to you?" "Said the deadline passed." Rebecca exhaled through her nose, clearly trying to keep calm. "That's not how this is supposed to work. You have rights, Dad." He didn't answer. Just motioned her inside. Later, at the diner, Henry sat in his usual stool, but he didn't speak much. The place was warmer than usual, ceiling fans stirring the thick morning air. Carol noticed the difference right away. She placed a slice of lemon pie in front of him without a word. "You don't have to do that," Henry said. Carol leaned in. "You don't have to say anything either. Just eat." From the jukebox, "Stand By Me" played softly, its lyrics melting into the clink of cutlery and the low murmur of conversation. Rebecca sat beside her father, sipping coffee with a tight grip on the mug. When they returned to the house, she stood in the living room, arms crossed, while Henry placed the pie box gently on the counter. "I don't get it," she finally said. "Why didn't you stop them? Call someone? The HOA isn't the law." Henry sat slowly, his knees aching from the morning. "Wasn't worth the shouting. But that truck was Mom's last gift to you. We can't let them take this sitting down. Then I hope you've still got that fire in you." The clubhouse door clicked shut behind Rebecca as she scanned the meeting notice board. The bulletin was sparse, one yellowing flyer about a pool cleaning schedule and a laminated sign that read in tidy Helvetica font, "By appointment only." Gone were the paper sign-ups for potlucks and Tuesday night bingo, the playful doodles from neighbor kids, or the little notes advertising handmade quilts and dog walking. Rebecca pressed her palm against the glass of the locked door, peering in. The overhead lights were off, but the glow of a computer monitor flickered somewhere in the back office. She tapped lightly, more out of instinct than hope. No response. Behind her, the soft buzz of cicadas blended with the clink of cutlery from the diner down the street. The fading heat of the day lingered on her arms as she turned away, already composing a mental checklist. She hadn't planned to turn this into a crusade. But the way her father's eyes had drifted toward the empty driveway, and the silence that had filled the room after, it didn't sit right. Not anymore. As she stepped onto the path leading back toward Henry's house, a voice startled her from the side. "You looking for Maureen?" A young man in a button-down shirt with HOA stitched near the collar stood holding a tote bag of file folders. He looked barely out of college, with a tan line from sunglasses and a badge that read, Blake, Administrative Assistant. "Yes," Rebecca said, adjusting her tablet bag. "She around?" "Not today," Blake replied, avoiding her gaze. "She mostly works remote now. Keeps her own schedule." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "So who manages this place?" Blake shrugged. "I open up for board meetings. Mostly paperwork." There was a beat of silence. Rebecca extended her hand. "Rebecca Wallace. My dad's truck got towed this morning." Blake's face tensed. "Oh, right. That case. You call towing companies for cases now?" "No, sorry. That came out wrong." He looked around nervously. "I just meant, there's a process. Maureen's big on compliance." Rebecca studied him. "Is she big on people?" He didn't answer, but his shift of weight said enough. Back at Henry's, dusk had settled in like a soft blanket. The porch light buzzed on automatically, casting a warm circle over the wicker chairs. Inside, Henry stood at the stove, humming faintly as he stirred a kettle. "She still runs on tea and principle," he said with a half-smile, placing a honey jar on the table. "I drink decaf now," Rebecca replied, settling in. "Getting old, I guess." He poured the hot water, gently pressing the tea bag with the back of a spoon, the way she'd liked since high school. "You still put in the honey first," she teased. "Habit," he said. "Some habits keep a man upright." Rebecca reached for a box on the counter and pulled out a stack of old HOA newsletters. The fonts changed over the years, bold serif giving way to cleaner sans serif, but the trajectory was clear. Monthly barbecues became quarterly meetings. Mentions of Maureen grew more frequent, first as secretary, then vice chair, then president. "She's been running this place like her own little fiefdom," Rebecca murmured. Henry sat across from her, brow furrowed. "People let her. Got tired. Distracted. Or just didn't care." "Well, I care now." She opened her tablet and pulled up the HOA codebook she'd bookmarked earlier. Dozens of clauses about property appearance, parking regulations, and fines, but precious little about due process or community appeals. By 9 o'clock, she'd compiled a folder of notes, photos of other non-compliant vehicles that hadn't been ticketed, budget discrepancies, missing meeting minutes. As she scrolled through her tablet, a knock came from the back screen door. Mel stood there, arms crossed, eyes sharp despite the soft housecoat and slippers. "You poking the bear?" Mel asked, stepping inside. "Trying to understand what kind of bear we're dealing with," Rebecca replied. Mel sat down heavily. "They pick on the quiet ones. Your dad never made noise. Easy target." Rebecca nodded slowly. "I think they're bluffing, and I want to call it." The room went still. Mel gave a low chuckle. "You've got your mother's spine." After Mel left, Henry wandered in with an old photo album. "In case you need more ammo," he said, placing it beside her tablet. Rebecca smiled, brushing her fingers across the worn leather cover. Then her tablet pinged softly. She opened it and blinked. An email from Blake. Subject, HOA budget files. Body, there's something you should see in the financials. Rebecca walked into the community meeting with a binder, not a smile. The air inside the clubhouse held a faint scent of mothballs and powdered creamer. Folding chairs creaked beneath residents in golf polos and orthopedic sandals. A table in the back sagged beneath trays of crumbly sugar cookies and a coffee urn that wheezed like it had run its last marathon. A laminated sign announced the annual Fall Chili Cook-Off, sponsored by HOA, dangling slightly under a strip of peeling tape. Henry was already seated in the second row, his veteran's pin catching the amber light from the wall sconces. He nodded when Rebecca caught his eye but didn't wave. He knew better than to draw attention. She approached the head table. Maureen sat at the center, flanked by two board members with tight smiles and careful posture. Blake sat off to the side, papers in front of him, a bottle of water untouched. He glanced up when Rebecca stopped a few feet from the table. "Evening," Rebecca said evenly. "Rebecca Wallace. I'd like to speak." Maureen stood slowly, her red blazer perfectly pressed. "Of course. We always welcome new voices." Rebecca took a breath, then opened her binder. "I've reviewed the HOA's most recent budget filings. I noticed several discrepancies I'd like the board to address." Maureen raised an eyebrow. "You're welcome to submit your concerns in writing." "I'm here now," Rebecca replied. "And I've brought copies." She handed a stack of highlighted pages to Blake, who took them with uncertain fingers. His eyes darted down the first page, then widened slightly. Rebecca turned toward the room. Page 3 details an expense for perimeter fence repainting, $3,800 drawn from the Common Maintenance Fund. The work order matches the property line of 124 Palm View Drive. She paused. "That's President Dalton's home address." A few residents murmured. One man near the back adjusted his hearing aid and leaned toward his wife. A woman in the second row whispered, "I thought we voted against that last spring." Maureen let out a smooth chuckle. The board approved that repainting unanimously. The fence borders the community jogging path. It qualifies as common use enhancement. Rebecca didn't flinch. "Except there's no documentation of the vote. Meeting minutes from that quarter are missing. And the check was issued before any maintenance request was filed." Blake shifted in his seat. Henry's gaze was steady, hands folded atop his cane. Rebecca continued, flipping to the next page. "I also found a $1,200 line item labeled consulting fee, no recipient listed." "Blake, could you clarify that one?" The room quieted. Blake hesitated. "I don't know. I just process what I'm given." "Then who signed off?" Maureen leaned forward. "We're all volunteers, Miss Wallace. Mistakes happen. But implying misconduct is..." "I'm not implying," Rebecca said calmly. "I'm asking. If these numbers aren't corrected, I'll be filing a formal inquiry with the county." Gasps. A few chairs shifted. Someone cleared their throat with theatrical effort. Henry's mouth curved in the smallest hint of a smile. Maureen's fingers tightened slightly on her folder. Then, as if remembering the script, she softened her expression. "You're making quite a name for yourself, Miss Wallace. Careful it doesn't stick." Carol brought Rebecca a slice of key lime pie with a wink, "For courage, sweetheart." The plate slid across the worn Formica tabletop, the pie's pale green filling perfectly mounded, crowned with a delicate swirl of cream. Rebecca smiled, eyes caught for a second by the delicate flake of crust at the edge, brown and buttery. She hadn't tasted that pie in 20 years, but remembered the crust. Still crisp on the bottom, still soft where it touched the lime. The lakeside griddle hadn't changed much. Ceiling fans turned in uneven circles above, one of them squeaking faintly with each rotation. The booths were lined with that same faded red vinyl she remembered from childhood visits. Her legs would stick to them on humid days. Retirees lounged in nearly every seat, newspapers rustling like slow waves, coffee refilled without asking. Rebecca took a bite, let the citrus spread over her tongue, and exhaled. "You'll do just fine," Carol said, sliding into the opposite booth. Her apron bore a fresh coffee stain, and her hair was swept up in the same no-nonsense bun she'd always worn. "I don't know what I'm doing," Rebecca admitted, setting her fork down. "Sure you do," Carol said. "You're standing up. That's more than most." They sat in silence for a moment, the radio playing Moon River in the background, sweet and slow. Carol leaned in. You know, Maureen once gave me a violation for mulch. Rebecca blinked. Mulch? Said it was non-compliant in color and texture. Can you believe that? I used cocoa shell mulch, smelled like chocolate. I thought it was nice. That's insane. Carol grinned. She said it was attracting raccoons. I said, good. They have more charm than your board meetings. They both laughed. It felt good. Loosening. The door jingled. Blake stepped in, clutching a thick manila envelope. He looked around nervously, then spotted them and approached the booth. I wasn't followed, he joked half-heartedly as he slid into the seat beside Rebecca. His cheeks were already pink. Carol gave him a coffee without asking. Blake opened the envelope. These are older copies of the HOA's original codebook. Pre-Maureen revisions. I made them at the public library, couldn't risk the office copier. Rebecca flipped through the pages, frowning. These rules are completely different. Yeah. The original charter talked more about neighbor support and safety, nothing about fence height down to the inch. Carol nodded. Back then, we helped each other plant hedges. Now we get letters about the wrong shade of green. Mel passed their table on the way to the counter, paused with a smile. Heard you shook Em up pretty good last night. I rattled the cage, Rebecca said. Not sure it did much. Mel snorted. Oh, it did. She leaned closer. You know the Winslows on Cypress Lane? Had to remove wind chimes last year, too noisy, Maureen said. Wind chimes. The woman's allergic to joy. Rebecca let that sit for a moment. Then she looked around. Booths filled with people who just wanted to read in peace. Who used to plant together, not report each other. This isn't about a truck, she said. It's about getting this town back. Carol stood, went to the counter, and returned with a small notepad. She slid it across the table. Some of us still remember what this place used to be, she said. Let's bring it back. Rebecca stared down at the paper. Handwritten names. 3 of them already. Space for more. She looked up and locked eyes with Blake. Would you testify, if it came to that? The clubhouse was locked by sunrise, with a notice taped on crookedly, temporarily closed for maintenance. Rebecca slowed her rental as she pulled into the lot, staring at the sign fluttering in the breeze. The paint was peeling around the doorknob, and the blinds were pulled tight. She stepped out, phone already in hand, and snapped a photo. The night before, she'd submitted an official request for the past 5 years of HOA financial reports and meeting minutes. It wasn't a surprise the doors were now shut. Not a coincidence, either. She sat behind the wheel for a moment, drumming her fingers against the steering wheel. The clouds were low, hanging thick and damp, and a mockingbird warbled somewhere nearby. Her phone chimed. Blake, no meeting today. Everything's gone quiet. Check your email. She opened the thread. It was a string of forwarded messages, internal communications from the HOA board. In one, Maureen had written in clipped sentences, purge all informal drafts. Keep final versions only. No need for old notes floating around. Another had Blake asking hesitantly, should we retain minutes from the March meeting regarding re-landscaping budget? No response. Rebecca stared at the screen, then took a slow breath. A neighbor's sprinkler sputtered to life down the road, the rhythm irregular like a nervous tick. Back at Henry's house, the porch smelled faintly of coffee and damp earth. Henry sat on a milk crate by the mailbox, screwdriver in hand, a small pile of rusted screws at his feet. He looked up with a grunt as Rebecca approached. You're rebuilding it? Darn thing's been leaning since summer, he said. Figured it deserved some respect. She watched him for a moment, then handed over her phone. They're scrambling. Henry peered at the emails, squinting. Deleting records? That's not just sloppy. That's hiding. Rebecca nodded. I'm contacting the city. Inside, she perched at the dining table with a yellow legal pad, her laptop open beside it. The walls still held the warmth of midday sun, and the ticking of the wall clock seemed louder than usual. As she typed, her words sharpened with each paragraph. Per Section 12 of Municipal Oversight Code 3B, homeowners associations are required to maintain accurate financial disclosures, made available upon formal request within 10 business days. Henry entered with 2 mugs, one sloshing slightly. I remembered, he said, handing her the one with sugar first. She smiled. Thank you. The phone call to the city clerk took 15 minutes. The woman on the line, efficient but curious, listened carefully, asked for document copies, and said, yes, that does fall under our review. After Rebecca sent the file attachments, she paced the living room, dodging a squeaky floorboard by habit. She paused by the mantel, eyeing a framed photo of her mother at the Gulf Palms chili cook-off, laughing, son had asked you. Her hands balled unconsciously into fists. The reply came quicker than expected. Subject, HOA complaint filed, confirmation. We have opened an internal investigation into Gulf Palms HOA. Thank you for your documentation. She read it twice, then looked toward the front window where Henry was now sweeping the porch, the repaired mailbox standing straighter than before. There was a click. Her phone buzzed. Blake, Maureen knows. She's planning something. Rebecca stared at the message, then out at the sunset-streaked sky. Something shifted behind her eyes, not fear, not quite, but the recognition of a storm gathering at the edge of calm. Chairs scraped across the tile as neighbors filed in, this time, with folded arms and narrowed eyes. The air inside the community clubhouse was heavy with humidity and hushes. The fans overhead spun but did little more than shuffled attention from corner to corner. Rebecca sat in the second row, a black binder resting on her lap. Next to her, Henry adjusted the veteran's pin on his lapel and leaned over. It's like a church meeting before the vote, except nobody's praying for Maureen. Rebecca didn't smile. Not yet. She scanned the room. Mel had taken her usual seat by the window, arms crossed. Carol was near the back, balancing a tray of lemonade cups on her hip. Thought folks might need something sweet, she'd whispered earlier, sliding one into Rebecca's hand. The board took their places at the folding table up front. Maureen arrived last. Her sunglasses stayed on for a full 10 seconds before she removed them with a practiced sweep. She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Thank you all for coming on short notice, she began. I know there's been some confusion. Rebecca stood. Not confusion. Concern. The room stilled. She opened the binder. Inside, copies of financial forms, emails, scanned receipts. She lifted one page high enough for the front row to see. This is a budget line from 3 years ago, $100 paid to a landscaping company registered to your nephew, Ms. Dalton. No disclosure. No board approval. Murmurs rippled across the room. Blake shifted in his chair, cleared his throat. She told me to skip that month's minutes. Said it wasn't necessary. Rebecca turned a page. This one's a receipt for paint. Same shade as Maureen's property fence. Paid out of communal funds. Maureen leaned forward, voice tighter. This is a smear campaign. You've been digging through drafts, trying to twist facts. I've been reading your words, Rebecca replied, laying down the email instructing deletions of prior minutes. Your instructions. Your signatures. A man from the board, gray hair, shaky hands, stood up. I didn't sign those approvals. That's not my writing. Gasps now. Then, from the back, Mel's voice rang clear. You fined me for a birdbath. A concrete birdbath. She stood. And now I see why you needed the money. Maureen stood abruptly. This meeting is out of order. Rebecca didn't flinch. She pulled a final sheet from the back of her folder. This is a signed notice from the city. Effective immediately, Gulf Palms HOA is under review for misuse of funds and will be placed under temporary administrative oversight. Silence, stunned and electric. Someone coughed. Someone else whispered, "It's real." Henry remained quiet. His hands were folded, his eyes damp. He nodded, just once. Maureen's eyes widened. She reached for her coffee, but her elbow caught the edge of the cup and sent it clattering to the floor. The dark splash spread like a stain on the tile. Without a word, she bolted from her chair, pushing past the board, heels echoing with sharp finality. Someone muttered, "Finally." The low rumble of an engine caught Henry's attention. It was unmistakable. He looked up from the porch, one hand resting on the cane beside his chair, the other holding a warm cup of coffee. The morning had brought a coolness unusual for Gulf Palms. A few fallen leaves scraped along the pavement in the breeze. Down the street came the familiar white and blue tow truck, this time without urgency or offense. The driver stepped out slowly, adjusting his cap as he approached the driveway. "Mr. Wallace," he said, eyes a bit lower than they'd been weeks ago. "Back where it belongs." Henry nodded, taking a few steps forward. The driver lowered the old pickup carefully onto the driveway. The tires touched asphalt like old boots finding their home by the door. "Appreciate you looking after her," Henry said quietly. "Just following orders then," the driver offered with a sheepish smile. "Glad to follow better ones now." By mid-morning, the driveway had turned into a small gathering spot. Carol walked over with a tray of spiced apple cider, her sweater dotted with tiny embroidered pumpkins. Mel brought her folding chair and sat under the shade of a palm. Rebecca appeared from inside, sleeves rolled, holding a printed draft. "New bylaws," she said, handing Henry a few pages. "Kindness first. Control last." Blake arrived moments later, winded from jogging over. "The city confirmed, Maureen resigned. They've asked me to serve as interim secretary until we can hold a proper vote." Henry looked at him, then walked slowly inside. He returned with a small box and handed Blake a faded, well-kept wrench. "This was mine when I was your age. Used it on this truck more times than I can count." Blake stared, speechless. "For doing the right thing," Henry added. Thanksgiving decor had started to appear across Gulf Palms. Cornucopias on porches, garlands of orange and brown leaves along doorways. The diner window glowed with warmth. Inside, neighbors gathered for carols, thankful neighbors, potluck. Bing Crosby played gently in the background, and someone brought a pie that didn't survive the first hour. Rebecca caught Henry standing by the truck later that evening, his hand gently resting on the hood. "Still smells like oil and pine," he murmured. She smiled. "You ready for a drive, Dad?" Henry looked at her, eyes soft beneath the brim of his hat. "Only if you bring the map." The old truck's return wasn't just about rust and rubber, it marked a turning point, where silence gave way to resolve. Neighbors who once waved in passing now stood side by side, eyes open and voices clear. When authority is used to serve, it builds trust. When it seeks to control, it breaks it. Perhaps it's never too late to dust off old engines, and old principles. Like a porch light left on through the night, quiet defiance can guide a whole street home.